Okay, actually, while they're all coming up, I'll ask you first, Giles. What proportion of your business is still institutional versus private investor? Let's put some numbers on that.
Today, our business is about low 90s% retail. Of the business we're writing today, of the loan book, it's 98% retail.
Oh, okay, so still overwhelmingly private investor based, yeah? Come on, Rick, come up. Is Charles in the room? Absolutely, Charles. And do you think that percentage is likely to go down over the next? Is Jens? Hello, Jens. Nice to meet you. Go sit down. Do you think that's likely to? Where do you think that will end up for Zopa? 70%?
I don't know exactly where it'll end up, but I think the platform will retain. Yeah, I would have thought at least 3/4 retail based.
Okay.
I mean, I think where we find institutional funds really helpful is in managing our growth. So. We've grown our retail lender base organically. We've never done any advertising to them. But that means you don't have a tap you can turn on and turn off very easily.
Yeah.
You can introduce a new marketing channel and bring in some extra new borrower demand.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to do the same on the lender side. So institutional funds are enormously helpful in allowing us to manage that growth.
And I mean, can you put to work, if an institutional investor comes to you and said, I want to put money to work £5 million, say, I'm just thinking a number off the top of my head. Could you deploy that reasonably quickly?
We would have to have a conversation with them as to what our funding need was at the time.
Yeah. So
we simply wouldn't take the money unless we could deploy it without denying a retail lender the chance to participate.
And that's the last point. I think it was Graham Wellesley was saying, not going to prejudice institutional and private. Are you in the same? You're going to offer the same terms to private retail investors as you are to institutional investors?
Yeah. We do. So our private lenders get a blend of the loans on the marketplace. Our private lenders can't choose which loans they want to lend into, and the same applies to our institutions. So they get a blend across the platform.
And will the institutional investors get the same protection? I'm going to talk a bit about this with Rhydian in a second, but the same protection from the protection fund that the private investors would. Are we talking pari passu across the piece?
That's completely their choice, and we're agnostic as to that. So we're very happy for them to benefit from our safeguard fund if they want to.
Yeah.
To date, none have, because they recognise that the chances are we're a very conservative business, we're going to overfund it, and they'll make a higher return if they don't take the benefit.
Average, what should an institution expect? I mean, you publish all your stuff on your website anyway, so what should they expect in terms of returns?
Well, so the net returns for Zopa are just north of 5%. Institutions might make very fractionally higher than that by not participating in Safeguard and not suffering the overfunding of it, if you like. And with leverage, they can turn that into a 10% plus return.
Okay. Rhydian, so you're Zopa's big competitor in the UK consumers market. Just give a bit of a background. So I think it's fair to summarise that I almost spot an element of anthropology in the origin of Zopa, in the sense that you're interested in people, the socialness of the internet. And that's fair to say, isn't it? That's something that motivates you quite strongly. So that's where you came from. Tell us what was RateSetter's guiding principles about where it's got to? Because again, you've done great business in the last few years. So where did the idea come from?
Yeah, well, I actually, my love really is in markets, actually. And I used to work for a company called Betfair, which applied peer-to-peer to betting. And in 2002, I wrote a couple of pages about how peer-to-peer could go to, be applied to money. So that was in 2002. I showed it to my brother, who thought I was a bit mad, and it never saw the light of day. But it was back then that I was just inspired by the idea of markets, of the idea of just using the internet to bring together people in a... And I'm particularly interested by the idea of the crowd setting the rate. That's what I'm...
And you've got your presentation this afternoon is all about that hallowed idea, which is we always talk about free markets and money markets, but actually they're not. They're rigged.
It's absolutely extraordinary that the most used commodity in our society is totally kind of everything about it has government involvement, and I'm fascinated by the idea of RateSetter or peer-to-peer as an asset class. Being seen as a sort of interesting indicator of people's idea of where rates should be.
So the real interest rate.
Yeah, so I mean, we like the idea of having the kind of base rate, which is what the government set, and then you have the kind of wholesale or commercial rate, which is what banks set. And then you get the idea of the retail rate, which is what we're trying to set at RateSetter.
And now, both you and Zopa have got protection funds, but you guys introduced it first. What was the idea about protection funds? Why did you do it? Because ultimately, if you believe that free market language, actually you shouldn't have a protection fund, should you? Because the free market should set its rate and it should be priced in accordingly. So what made you have a protection fund?
That's absolutely fair, but I mean, effectively, because I'm very interested in rates and the idea of the crowd giving their view on where interest rates should be. Because I mean, if you look at interest rates in most markets, like government bond markets, the idea of credit risk is eliminated. There is no credit risk. So effectively, rates are set by duration, they're set by interest rate expectations. There's nothing in it that's to do with credit risk. So in order to achieve what we wanted to achieve, which is a kind of retail money market, you had to eliminate the credit risk.
Yeah.
So that people concentrate on, how much is 2-year money worth, how much is 3-year money worth. And the best way to do that was through the provision fund. So we didn't do it to sort of lessen people's choice. We did it to try and achieve what we're trying to do, which is to kind of have a retail money market.
And I'm interested also on Giles' experience. Is the protection fund well covered in terms of likely losses? I mean, one can only put your finger in the air, get the crystal ball out, and work out what might happen if interest rates go up. You can make a reasonable expectation. Are you well covered, both of your protection funds? I presume it'd be in the same way that banks must, in the Basel III, over protect their shareholders and capital buffers. You're not just going to be one times covered on your protection fund, I assume, in Rhydian's case?
No, I mean, we're currently about 2.2 times covered.
On projected losses?
On projected losses. And, there's a good argument that it should be run at 1 times. I mean, that would be arguably the most efficient system. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Giles. There's an argument for that. We're quite happy with our concept of trying to create an ever safer system. Because our objective is to sort of try and eliminate this concept of credit risk.
So effectively to turn it into a savings product.
Not eliminate, because you can't eliminate it.
You can't eliminate it. But effectively turn it into a savings product in reality. It's not, because I mean, in a sense, there is some investment risk. But
yeah, I'm happy to give a savings product. I mean, I think that these things are going to blur over time. I think that the model that we're pioneering in the UK is totally transformational, because I think it's going to become very relevant to the man on the street. And ultimately, I think that's what motivates both of our businesses, is to come up with a product that can be relevant to the man on the street. And if it gets seen as a proxy savings accounts in due course, well, that's fine by me. I mean, we shouldn't describe it as one at the moment, because ultimately it's not a savings account because it doesn't have the government backing.
No.
But I think that's actually where the value is coming from, weirdly, at the moment, is the fact that...
as an alternative to savings accounts.
Yeah.
So Giles, is your protection fund more than 1 times covered?
Yeah, it is, and I agree with Rhydian that actually it would be more elegant if it was exactly once covered, but that's obviously impossible. I think we will naturally always cautiously overfund it, and that's unhelpful on one dimension.
Yeah. Rhydian, one last point before I go to Charles. Again, likely returns, and what's your attitude towards institutional money? I mean, were you same terms as private money, and what should institutional investors expect to get?
My belief is that it makes absolute sense that there's going to be retail money and institutional money. I think at RateSetter at the moment there is an institutional lending. It doesn't get the same terms as the retail. It just has a different product to the retail because it doesn't have the protection of our provision fund. I can completely understand why the institutions require a higher yield than the man on the street. Let's not beat around the bush here and pretend that that's not what, retails have lower expectations, because they have different objectives, whereas institutions require high yields to pay for their infrastructure, to pay for all sorts of things. So it makes absolute sense, and we're pretty open to diversifying our funding mix. While, as Giles said, our front end will all be about making it a great experience for the retail customer.
And presumably because you've got different time products, so between 4, 5, 6% a year, that kind of range?
Yeah, the retail customer can get up to 6% on RateSetter for 5-year money, and the institutions are targeting about 7 or 8%, and they're doing that by not taking the protection of the provision fund. Okay. So that's a substitution effect. Okay, and again, so just so we get some sense of scale, total transactions to date, Giles?
We've lent just under 700 million.
And this year, or the last last 12 months?
So we've lent 250-something million in the last 12 months.
Okay, so running at almost 20 million quid a month, kind of.
Running about 30 now.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. So picking up space.
There's growth throughout the year, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Rhydian?
We'd do about 251.
Hang on a second. It's 5 million more than. Do I sense competition?
Yeah, no. We've. I think we've done 262.
Okay.
Because I was asked it today, so that's the answer.
Okay. So some sizable sums of money that you can deploy, both of you. So let's just look a little bit at continental Europe now. For we English, it's a strange foreign land. May become stranger and more foreign if our Prime Minister gets his way. So Charles, let's start off with you. I think we heard early on from one of the guys from Shepherd Capital that continental Europe's not really been quite as advanced in many respects as the UK and the US. Talk us through what you guys do at Pret Union, and I presume you're in the consumer space. So talk us through what are you effectively a kind of continental European version of both Rhydian and what Giles are doing?
Yeah, basically we're also doing consumer loans,
yeah,
but in a slightly different way, since we have mutual funds. So basically our investors are individuals or institutionals, but they don't purchase loans directly.
Okay.
They purchase bonds, a bit like lending clubs, mutual funds.
Yep.
Meaning that as of today, around 60% of our inflows come from institutional investors.
And how much are you running on a monthly basis in terms of inflows?
We're doing 8 million euro per month.
Okay, so good volume. Yeah. And prime borrowers, again, because I think that's true. You're both Rhydian and Giles, you're both prime borrowers, aren't you? So prime borrowers or more variety?
It's quite super prime because
super prime.
I mean, in France people don't borrow as much as in the UK or in the US.
But your government makes up for it, don't
it? Yeah. so basically default rate in France are 3 times lower, basically.
Oh, right.
So, but we still have several borrower categories. We have the super prime, the prime, and the near prime, and we address the 3 categories.
And interesting, is there a different culture to borrowing in places like France and Germany? I mean, I think it's fair to say that we Anglo-Saxons have rather maybe indulged in from the cup of credit. I think it's fair to say. Let's just say that it's pretty normal for people to have, you have consolidator loans to deal with the loans you've taken out, and that we've an advanced credit culture. Is it different in the Eurozone, and particularly in France? Are people more suspicious about borrowing?
You're right. You're right, especially in France. They don't like to borrow money in France, so they prefer not to spend rather than borrowing money. And on top of that, banks and credit institutions are quite competitive, a bit like in the UK in 2005 or 6, I'll say.
Yeah.
So the spread is lower in France. So.
Okay. And would your standard product be what? Loan, 3-year, 5-year?
We offer four tenors, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and on average it's 4.
Oh, right, that's quite interesting. It's quite long duration.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
And so that's why we structure our mutual funds with several duration. For instance, you have short duration funds and long duration funds.
And presumably, because of that 4-year duration, therefore, that's a much easier product to sell on to institutions, is it? Because effectively they sort of know what they're getting themselves in for. It's a decent duration for institutions. So are you finding institutions gravitating towards the longer end of the curve or the shorter end of the curve?
You're right. They prefer the long duration funds.
Yeah. Very interesting. And because of the different French attitude towards debt, does that mean that when you have a spike in the business cycle, a depression in the business cycle, then effectively defaults go up? Are the French less likely to default? Or are you actually just as likely to default as we profligate Anglo-Saxons are?
I mean, because of the welfare states, I mean, default rates are quite stable. For instance, if you lose your job, you get money from the government during 2 years. Okay, it's surprising, but it's like this.
2 years?
Yeah.
Only 2 years, that's reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. So it's stable.
Okay.
France is very stable in terms of default.
Okay, that's very interesting.
That's what the investors like. Even investor from the UK. We have investor from the UK.
And when were you founded?
We launched the service in December 2011.
Okay,
2011,
so
sorry.
you haven't gone through what Zopa had, where Zopa did have a bit of a spike in some of the defaults some of the way along, in some vintages. So you never had any of that?
No, we didn't.
No. Yes, now I want to talk a bit about your Trustbuddy. Now, Trustbuddy got mentioned a bit earlier on. Cormac very sensibly mentioned you in your list of companies that you could invest in, and you are publicly quoted on the Swedish market.
Yeah, Nasdaq OMX.
Nasdaq OMX, yeah. Now, you operate in the short duration end of the curve, basically, in the sense of your average loan would be what? How many days?
The average loan with us is, okay, all loans is issued for a month, but the average duration is 3.2 months. You can renew your loans for a certain period of maximum 5 months.
So, I mean, use the terrible English terms, that payday lending market would be your classic market.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah. And how do you, now you operate across Europe, so you're in Sweden, you're in Denmark, you're in Poland. Spain. And
we're in 7 markets. Yeah.
7 markets. And in your business, it's a very different model. I'm fascinated to talk to you because we've been hearing a lot about people who do 4-year durations, 1-year durations, 2-year durations. Yours is months duration, so you're closer to the receivables exchanges businesses in the business area or private space. Do you find that actually you have a big issue trying to manage defaults and trying to manage that the people basically not paying you back?
I don't think there is any difference between us and the long-term lenders. The volume is still, I mean, it's depending on the volumes, and the systems is still the same. Our automated models, how we do that, and how we do it through the debt collectors or through the factoring companies that's actually buying our debts.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the volume is 1 or 1,000. I mean, it's pretty much the same.
And what would be the average loan? Talk us through. So average loan, who's the typical kind of borrower? I'm fascinated. Talk to one of your colleagues, and they're really interesting, actually. You were very different than I expected.
Yeah, first of all, when we started this business, we came up with the idea of taking the lending activity to the basic level where people could borrow money for free. Okay, so you can borrow money for free for the first 14 days, and actually between 30 and 40% is using that alternative.
30 to 40% of your book, really?
Yes.
Wow, interesting.
And it's also a very good marketing incentive. But anyway, the product, the average size is approximately 3,400 crowns. Would be approximately $600.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the average duration is 3.2 months. We have varies from market to market, but between 20 and 30% goes to debt collection. But 85% of that is solved immediately, meaning we are constantly down at 3 to 4% potentially losses.
Which is a lot lower than I would have expected. I was always expecting double digit. So most people pay you back. And am I right in thinking the average customer who's like to borrow is just as like to be a woman as a man, and younger, more social media orientated?
The average age is between, there's 2 main groups, 25 to 30 and 30 to 45. 51% is women and 49% is men, yeah.
Okay, so very female focused, quite young. And are you finding, I'm just fascinated, are you finding that they're using mobile phones to access stuff? Because they're quite a sassy bunch of people, really. Are you finding that you're getting a lot of information from social media and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, we have a certain system, especially in Scandinavia, not necessarily in Spain and Poland, but we have a governance system where we can withdraw or take out all the data of what kind of income you have and what kind of salary you have, what kind of debt you have, etc., etc. So we have really good data. On top of that, we are also aggregating with social data or big data scoring. So we built our own system for social scoring. And when aggregating this together, we come out with a very good pattern of the people in Scandinavia, which we also can export to the other markets, which tells us again how the pattern would be of the people in the other markets. And we are testing out that right now, and actually we have very, very good numbers on this, especially in Poland, actually. So it's
so you're using social media to score?
Yeah, social information aggregated with the existing data information we have on customers to understand the pattern in our existing markets, of course, but also in new markets, to try and come up with a model which could be a model without borders, if you understand, instead of constantly rely on existing systems, for example, in wherever, if it would be France or UK, wherever. I mean, making our own scoring based on the own information and data that we have on
Fascinating. I bet that's going to be used much more widely in the whole alternative finance space. Right, we've run a little bit out of time. I'd like to thank our panelists very much, and also do have a chat to them. They're around later on. Find out about what they're up to. Thank you very much.